Hello, how's it going? Bonnie Violet here, a queer chaplain. And in case you don't know where you are at TranSpirit as part of the Faith, Hope, and Justice series with Glide Memorial Church and the Glide Pride team, who are sponsors tonight. So big shout out to Glide for hosting this event so that we could, do this. So thanks so much to Glide. Tonight is our trans part. We have a part of this series. There are 6 episodes. They're a mixture of drag and spirituality conversations and trans and spirituality conversations. And tonight we are having a trans and spirituality conversation with Hollywood, Texas. And I will introduce them here in a minute. For folks who haven't been here before, we love it if you engage with us. Take a moment and share this. Share this wherever you're listening to it on some social media or whatever. Let your friends know, invite them to come. Also, tell Hollywood how beautiful they are and say hello and do all that sort of stuff. You also, this is where kind of a spiritual space meets like a show, like a show with a performer or a drag show or whatever. It's not a drag show, but a performer. And so you can tip Hollywood along the way. So these are Hollywood's, the ways you can electronically send them some coin. I think Perry's going to put that up here in a second. So keep an eye out on that. If you want to send a little tip, that's cute. But if you don't, that's fine too. We're just glad that you're here. Also, where are we at? What am I talking about? So a little bit about me as a queer chaplain. I am a trans, genderqueer, spiritual drag artist and digital chaplain. So I feel called to be with people around death and dying to self. Chaplains are usually around death and dying to the body. And for me, I'm more around to ourself, our mind, our spirit, really our mind, and introducing our spirit into that experience of death, usually around an identity. For me, I experienced it around my HIV status. I experienced it around my sexual orientation and my gender identity. I went through those experiences and those identities believing that I couldn't access spirituality, I couldn't access God, I couldn't access creator, that somehow I wasn't worthy or I didn't have permission, or I don't know what it was, but there was a lot of stuff that kept me from thinking that I could exist with all those things at once. And once I was able to, find a space in which I could be spiritual and queer and transy and like whatever the fuck, my life has been so much better. And so my hope is just to help people see that people do exist. People that you think might not have spiritual experience do. And so this is an opportunity to kind of hear some of those narratives. Let's just jump right in there. Again, we'd love to hear your comments or anything like that as we go throughout the show. So our guest this evening is Hollywood, Texas. Hollywood, Texas, the Last Mojosexual, is a curator of sacred space, an ancestral storyteller, and chosen healer of the first gender, indigenous, intersex, intergender, and interspirit ancestors of the human being. They are called on to serve spirit through all that they touch by restoring the long-lost language of life itself, known as authentic movement. As an illustrator, drag performer, go-go dancer, sacred intimate, and social revolutionary, they are determined to dismantle the oppressive structure of the stationary, binary-obsessed, settler-colonizer illness of the individual ego and return our species to the sacred homeland called community. This is Hollywood, Texas.
Hello. Wow. What a wonderful introduction. It's almost as if I wrote that myself.
I know there's a lot there that I'm excited that we can talk about. The way you always have such a gift with words. I've always been amazed by that.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Yes, I think words are very meaningful to me because they are very impactful, and I have definitely cultivated my true authentic self along the lines of language in many forms.
Awesome. Well, I am so excited about you being here this evening. Thanks so much for joining us. And I usually like to just kind of get right into the conversation, and I always like to start with childhood. So would you like to tell us a little bit about what life was like for you as a child?
Sure. Thank you. Yes. My childhood was very transient, actually. I was on the move quite a bit as a child. I was born in the Bay Area, Redwood City, and this is my home. I lived here for the first few years of my life. My mother remarried into the military, and I bounced around the United States quite a bit. I ended up spending some very formative years in the state of Texas, and I spent a lot of time between Texas and San Francisco Bay Area until I finally decided to move back here on my own. And as a child, my relationship with spirit was similarly strained by, I think, some of the conversations you mentioned earlier, which was a lot of relationships that we are told about as far as being queer in any capacity goes, are in fact removed from the ideas we have of spirit, which is only, for the most part, something called religion. So I definitely connected to the religion that I was born into, because of the body I was born into is a very spiritual body. And I connected with that until recently, coming to my authenticity, I came to my authentic spirit as well. So life as a child for me was actually very lonely. I did not make a lot of friends throughout my life. I was moving around a lot and really had to develop and cultivate a relationship with myself and with my imagination. And this is where all of my authenticity has come out of. This space that I spend with my time in myself, in my imagination. And I've done that since I was a kid, and it's always been a very special place for me. I've always been interested in the arts and drawing and illustration. So that was a way for me to build a relationship with my imagination and maintain that relationship throughout my life, which for me, I know now as a relationship with my ancestors.
You had mentioned that your relationship with spirit or understanding with spirit kind of changed with you coming to know your, I don't know the language you use, so sorry, I don't want to like put words in your mouth, but you'd mentioned, do you want to talk with us a little bit more about that?
Yeah, sure. For me, my experience of gender, my experience of sex, my experience of sexuality, and my experience of sex have all been, in fact, the same experience. So for me to process a transition was a spiritual choice, a spiritual decision. And I got there, Lord knows how I got there, but that's where I got. And I have fully come out of this combined relationship of sexuality actually being spirituality and spirituality actually being sexuality. So for me, they're one and the same, and I could not do one without the other. I identify now as a first gendered human being because this is how my ancestors have guided me to identify. They were known as many other things. The people that I come from were known as many other things, but who I am and who I am called to be are definitely in the lines of transness as a word and an experience. today. So we could talk more about those ancestors if you want.
Yeah, I mean, I definitely like, for me, I love hearing that because for me, my transness is a direct result of my connection with Creator, God, whatever it is I decide to call it that day. But my seeking of that connection with my spirit and the soul and the world, like my transness is what kind of comes out because of that. And I love hearing that for you as well, too. But yeah, do you want to tell us a little bit more about your ancestors?
Sure, yes. My ancestors are a very large, very ancient group of dead and death, and the nature of dead and the nature of death is actually birth and rebirth. So my ancestors are actually my first memory that I have as a child. I have a very clear, distinct memory of a dream, a vision. My experience with it as a child was, though, a nightmare. And so the earliest memory I can think of is this nightmare that I would experience all of the times that I would be ill or sick or overworked in some ways. And I have a very highly effective immune system, so I was sick a lot. And so I encountered this nightmare a lot. And this nightmare was terrifying. It was not only a visual experience, it was a audible experience. It was a sensory experience across the board. It wasn't just like watching a dream. It was very much in my body at the same time. And a few years ago, I was witnessing my life crumbling before me, essentially. I decided to pursue an event that had a healer come and process a certain type of ancestral healing. And in this course that was several days in a row, we were instructed and guided towards connecting with our ancestors. And when I reached connection with my ancestors and began to communicate with them, we communicated again beyond words, beyond visuals, but the communication between me and them was, "Oh, here you are." And their response being, "Yes, we've been here the whole time." And my response being, "Oh, that's good to know. Where have you been? How could I have known you?" And they told me, "Well, you've known us in the same way that we just did this thing together. What we did together was hold forgiveness for our ancestors together." And so I said, "Oh, so we've interacted before in this place called forgiveness. What does that mean? Can you show me?" And they showed me. And what I experienced there in that day as a full-grown adult was the first memory I had ever had as a human being, which was this terrifying nightmare. And only then did I see more of what they were showing me. And it was very scary in that moment, but I stayed with it. And my ancestors held my hand and said, "We know you're scared." And essentially, I just witnessed and was shown all that I needed to know and all that I needed to see there in one single solitary moment that has continued to last now for well over 3.5 years. So I believe that this is true and going strong. And there was not one thing to see, not one thing to hear or experience, but a multitude and an endless amount of things. And this became the recultivation of my relationship with my ancestors.
Yeah, and so the fear isn't there anymore.
The fear is definitely still there. It's in a different place now. Yeah.
Understood.
Yeah. the fear of being with them is no longer there. The fear of experiencing what they have to show me is no longer there. But I still definitely encounter a great deal of fear. Being the person that I am called to be today is a very terrifying thing to do for me. And I have spent a great deal of my life knowing I was being called to do and to be something that I was unable to be, and wondering when I would be able to become this thing that I knew that I was called to be. And it was meeting up with my ancestors, reconnecting with them, and them holding my hand through terrifying experiences that has given me the strength and still does to this very day.
And is that related to the last Mojosexual?
Yes. I am the last Mojosexual. I am the last Mojosexual because I don't believe sexuality is a collective experience in any way. I believe sexuality is an individual experience. And I believe that a lot about what we're told is true is actually the truth that has been flipped. So growing up, me and probably yourself and probably most people in this country at least have experienced sexuality as something that's being defined by another person or who I share my body with, right? I have learned that sexuality for me has nothing to do with any other body. So in truth, I cannot identify as a heterosexual, and in truth, I cannot identify as a homosexual. And in truth, I cannot identify myself by including any other body. And so my sex is mine, and I have named it Mojosexual because mojo is a word that other people's ancestors have carried on this country and on this land. Mojo stems from Black lives and their experience with spirit and their experience with maintaining their indigeneity. And so mojo is a word that connotates authenticity. And that's what mojosexual means for me. My sexuality is authenticity. That is my sex, that's my gender, that's my expression, that's my identity about everything. It's me, it's mine. And I'm only interested in sharing my life sexually with other people who are invested in their own authenticity and are simply looking beyond an opposite body or a same-sex body. I reject the notion that there is same sex. I reject the notion that there is opposite sex. I only believe in authenticity. So I truly believe every single individual on planet Earth has only ever and will only ever be their own sexuality, their own gender, and their own identity. But we are only given large groups to identify with.
I get a sense of that. Like most of us won't let ourselves experience it that way because we're bought into what the world tells us or what somebody else told us about what we have to do and how we have to identify and all of that. So you seem really, all this stuff is super integrated. It's really not about like parts. Was there a process of becoming whole with all of that, or was it something that's kind of always been there for you?
It has definitely always been there. The first gender is something I am called on to be. It is a place and a role within community, and it is a sacred space for healing. And before the binary gender we experience today was set in place as the only option, the first gender was no gender. The first gender was infinity gender. And so being the first gender is something that I've been called on to do and to be since I was born. However, when I was born, I was also challenged to maintain my knowledge and my self by the ritual practices of the people I was born into. And the ritual practices of the people I was born into for the past 1,000, 2,000, maybe 4,000 to 6,000 years now is the ritual practice of genital mutilation on infants. And this is given a name called circumcision. It's also given several other names in the native language of the religion that my people are connected to, which is Judaism. This ritual is in place because of the first gender. This ritual is a means to make sure the first gender stays too terrified to be the first gender. And this works on a completely mechanical, scientific level. And so not only was I called to be who I am, I was also challenged to be who I am by what I refer to as my enemy. I think it's a very spiritual and holy thing to have an enemy. And I'm very grateful for my enemy. I hold sacred space for my enemy because my enemy has hurt me permanently, but my enemy has also shown me who I am to my fullest. And they have challenged me to come out. They have challenged me to be me with every step that I take in pure defiance of thousands of years of sexual repression against my people.
Are you comfortable with talking a little bit more about that enemy? Is it a person? Is it a structure? Is like, how would you define it? If you're comfortable with sharing that.
I would love to tell you about my enemy.
All right.
My enemy has many names. Today, the most trendy word we can refer to my enemy with is called the colonizer. The colonizer can also be referred to as the patriarchy. The colonizer can be referred to as Puritanism. Is that even a word? Puritanical. So my enemy is very ancient. In fact, my enemy is almost as ancient as my ancestors. And my enemy is a born response of my ancestors. I give my enemy a name, and that name is called Yahweh. And this comes from the Hebrew language for one of the many sacred names of God, the Creator. So this person is kind of like a real person to me because I don't believe we have actually a choice in who we believe in purely based on our mind or our heart. I believe we choose who we believe in with our actions. And for thousands of years, my people have chosen to believe in Yahweh with their actions. And there's no getting around that. The colonizer we know it in today in America is simply an evolution and an extension of a very ancient entity, a very real deity that exists and has permeated indigenous cultures the world over for an unknown amount of time now. I don't believe there's more than maybe 2 or 3 places on Earth that have not been affected by the shared path against nature and indigeneity as the colonizer whose roots are founded in Yahwehism.
Yeah.
And that's a very real practice that existed around or before the same time as the beginning of Judaism. There were many gods. One of their names was Yahweh. This god became the god of the Jewish people. And then this god demanded that no other gods exist. So this was the beginning of Judaism and the end of indigenous, intergender, interspiritual, and intersexual people. Not only was it the end of their existence, but it was the end of their reverence. The first gender is a place where intersexual people are revered, honored, and held sacred for their knowledge that resides within their body. The same is true for intergendered people who hold more than one gender in their body or throughout their life. The same is true for interspiritual people who hold several different spirits within their body or throughout their life.
So are those then, I guess, is that then those identities or those individuals are what kind of take on the enemy, or are here to have it? I don't know, how do they interact with the enemy?
Well, we all interact with my enemy.
Yeah.
We all interact with my enemy by no choice. These actions are infused into the society that we live in and the comforts that bring us being human today. So there was a time when the human being walked on the earth without a paved road. Now human beings mostly walk on paved roads. And so that seems like a very basic illustration, but that's gender to me. And that's expression to me. Gender and expression are one with how each individual person walks the earth. If all we are able to walk on earth is a covering of the earth, then we're never actually walking on the earth. And so intersex people walk the earth. They walk the earth however they choose or however they know best. Intergender people the same, and interspiritual people the same. It is the being of authenticity, and the most authentic way to be a person and an individual that is the weapon against my enemy. My enemy has set many things in place to prevent what I call authentic movement. And to move authentically is a very dangerous thing because of this. It is dangerous because it is literally unsafe. If you think about a road, once again, not only are roads paved, but they're lit. So if you go off-road, you're walking in the dark and it's dangerous and, you can't see where you're going. And so in
your understanding, can everyone kind of exist as one of those enters, or is it not everyone sort of situation?
Yes. I truly know for a fact that every single human being on planet Earth is intersex. Again, we are simply prevented from knowing that to be true, hence the existence of intersex people. However, it's just true every single body on planet Earth forever since the beginning has not only one hormonal definition, but several. And every human being is a combination of, at the very least, two different sexes. So it is my knowledge that every single person is intersexual, is intergendered, and is interspiritual. However, our enemy, Yahweh, prevents us from knowing that to be true. Therefore, the reverence and honor of these type of people, my type of people, your type of people, is that much more important.
Yeah, I hear that a lot. I hear you. We're going to take like a quick little break, and then we'll come right back and continue the conversation.
Cool.
And we're back. Ooh.
Hi.
Hi. Folks that are listening, please feel free to send questions our way, whether you're on Twitch or Facebook or YouTube, wherever you're watching us. Feel free to send a comment or a question. One of the questions I had for you, Hollywood, was what are part of your spiritual practices or rituals? Can you share some of that with us?
Sure, yes. My spiritual practices all revolve around movement and moving authentically. This can be as very minimal as breath and learning what it means to even breathe authentically. And this can also kind of look as big as something like drag. To me, when I do drag, I like to put as much of myself into it as possible, to the point where when I'm done, I can't breathe, I'm exhausted, I'm pouring sweat. And that is my body moving kind of at its max capacity, which I would liken to maybe the opposite of meditation, which is where I just sit in my room, close my eyes, and breathe. However, I believe they are the same, in fact, interaction, and an interaction with my ancestors through my body by moving authentically. And if you don't know about or are confused about the term breathing authentically, I believe that's a great place to start, because that's where I started. I started learning about myself through breath. And so I have an altar at home. I sit at it. I give my ancestors gifts. I move my body in ways that I am compelled to move my body. I write down things that come to my head that are in my imagination. I draw things that come to my head that are in my imagination. I pursue dance. I pursue performance. I pursue physical therapy. I do a lot of things. I engage with my body on so many different levels, because this is the altar that my ancestors have given me to communicate with them. And so I honor that simply by choosing what's most pleasurable for me. And by choosing what's most pleasurable for me, I have cultivated, again, a very strong relationship with my ancestors. And that looks so many different ways.
That was my next. Yeah, that would be my next question.
So simple, or it could be something very intense. But moving authentically, for me, not only means like a physical act that I do with my body, such as a dance, but movement to me also means how I move throughout the world. how I walk down the street, how I interact with my neighbors, with people. Movement is also across time. And so my transition in of itself, changing who I am, changing how I look, changing my facial hair, changing the way I do my hair, change is a movement. Change is moving throughout time, and change is the most sacred place that you can find the first gender.
Where do you, I guess, what was I going to say? Like where I guess what's next for you in your spiritual experience? Is there, I don't know, can you talk with me more about kind of what your spiritual experience or your overall experience is developing into? Or
yeah, sure. I'm very excited to be cultivating my authenticity and honoring what comes out of that. And what has most recently come out of that is my hands-on practice as a healer. My practice as a healer has stemmed from my profession as a professional movement facilitator, strength coach, a fitness trainer. And this was my way to cultivate another relationship with my ancestors through my body. And I have been called on to change that once again. And so what I'm changing myself into now, as far as a maybe more professional person, is a very tangible healing that in this time and in this country is known as sexual healing. And what I have been learning recently is more about how I can, as a facilitator, help other people get to know themselves through authentic movement. And again, that can be simply as something like breath. A lot of the sessions I had with clients as a fitness trainer were revolved around breath. And that becomes the doorway to anywhere I want to go. So that's the doorway for anybody that I am teaching anything. However, instead of starting with breath and going to fitness and exercise and pumping iron, I am starting to change my practice into starting with breath and going to pleasure. And what makes each individual's body most pleasurable or most pleasured. Because again, I don't believe that any single person is a homosexual, and I don't believe that any single person is a heterosexual. So if I believe that I'm surrounded by a bunch of people who are not what they say they are, and I am invested in helping and guiding my community through healing, I would love everybody to know themselves. And knowing in Hebrew has connotations of intercourse and sexuality. And in the Bible, knowing was having intercourse with somebody, because to the first gender, they are in fact the same thing. My knowledge of me has only come out of me pursuing what's most pleasurable for me through breath, through self-touch, through moving throughout the world, through moving in intimate spaces, public spaces, sitting in a chair differently. I used to sit in a chair differently. Now I choose to sit in chairs authentically, because I believe that for me, at least, being authentic in every single moment and with every single breath is what provides me with what I am looking for in the world externally in every single case across the board. And so that's what I'm invested in sharing with people and guiding other people towards.
Yeah, I desire that type of experience. I totally hear what you're saying. I was curious how, because I know language is a big part of this, and the language that you use is amazing. How do you, I guess, for folks who don't speak the language, if you will, like how do you navigate that interaction with folks who maybe don't understand, or vice versa, right? That where the language is different.
Language is fun, but it's not necessary. Verbal language is what I mean.
Right.
When I was a kid, somebody told me that my actions spoke louder than words. And I believe that to be true more so now today than I could ever understand that to be before. And so this is why action, why movement, why change is so important to me, why breath is so important to me, is because it is language. Action is you speaking authentically, you know, how you act, how you move. We are not only voting for people in office and things like that, we're voting for everything by every act we take, every person we shop from, every place we give our time and attention, everything that we eat. All of this is action, and all of this is a language. Our actions are our language, more so than our words. Our words are simply spells that we cast out into the void, hoping truth comes back. But our actions are beyond casting spells. Our actions are writing down the words. We write down our own words on a page every single time we act. And so for me, acting authentically has become my prime focus, desire, and motivation, and the only thing I would love to share.
Right. And that's a universal language.
It is very universal, yes.
Yeah. I apologize for my fumbling of the question.
No fumbles at all.
Yeah.
In fact, the only way I could even get to these words that I seem to be so clear with here today was by fumbling for the past 3 or 4 years, when all of these words and feelings come to me and I have no idea what they mean or what to do with them. I just write them down, and I keep writing them over and over and over and over, and I keep fumbling over and over and over and over. And then after fumbling and tumbling, I'm able to stand, and now I have words. But I think even just a few years ago when we first met, there was a lot I didn't have words for, and it's taken many fumbles.
Yeah, I was gonna say that when I remember when I first met you, I couldn't follow you. I was totally into what you were saying, but I was like, I thought I was dense, or like I just wasn't like catching up. But I hear you clearly today. And I think that probably has more to do with me, like being open and being still and like listening. But I really just appreciate your language and how you exist. Not that, yeah, that might feel weird. Yeah.
No, that's perfect. That's beautiful. How I exist is my language. Yes, I very much mean that, and it's exactly what I would like to say. Yeah.
So we're like right around the 45-minute mark, and I feel like we've touched on a lot of things, but is there something else that you would like to speak about?
There's a lot that I want to speak about, but I'll actually bring it back around to what you began with your definition as a chaplain, which I love to hear you say, because you included helping people in a space that surrounds death, essentially.
Yeah.
And for me, this has been the most important aspect of knowing myself, about connecting with my ancestors, about choosing to be authentic, about looking my fear right in the face and continuing forward anyway. All of that is motivated by death. Mm-hmm. And as a former person with a previous name, I came face to face with my own death and had to make a decision. I could continue or I could change. And I looked at my own death and I decided to change. And so cultivating my relationship with my ancestors has only ever been going into a place that feels very scary. Death, that's a very scary thing, right? People need help with that. We all need help with that. But death is a part of life.
Yeah.
You know, people can say, I'm dying or I'm living. People can say I'm new or I'm old. But any way you want to define it, there's one thing that we're all guaranteed, and that is death. And so the honor, the reverence, the respect, the adoration for such a place is not something that we are shown how to do in many ways. And so to have you describe yourself with that title as a person who works in that space, I definitely really resonate with, because that's not a space that the majority of people are encouraged to cultivate a relationship with.
Yeah, it's really interesting too. The thing that triggered me to kind of move into that lane was actually a physical death, which was interesting. But I feel like I had more comfort and I don't know, ability to speak more about like the other forms of death that are not in the body. Yeah. And I totally get that. I remember when I had HIV, I was diagnosed with HIV, and for a long time I was traumatized and it was really hard. And I was living my life like in a way that I just didn't want to die.
Yeah.
And I didn't want to like suffer before I died. And then eventually I was able to change that to where I wanted to live. And it was like my medication seemed to work better and I seemed to get better results, even though I was doing the same shit. But because I was able to just change that perspective a little bit. So that's what I hear you saying when you were just speaking. I was like, oh, that kind of came to my mind.
Definitely. All of that. I believe intention is potent medicine. And that when we move through the world without intention, we experience lots of pain, lots of illness, lots of suffering. Not that those things go away without intention, but our experience with them can be a little bit more, I think, less subtle or more profound, more deep than simply looking at death as death, right? Death is also not just death. Death is also birth, and birth is not just birth. Birth is also death. So
death is the birth of life.
Yes, exactly. Having awareness, having intention, I believe, is a very magical spiritual thing and does change what we're already doing into something more meaningful, something more purpose-filled.
What would you like to, just in closing, what kind of wisdom? I mean, you've already shared a lot of wisdom, but is there something like a quote, some wisdom or something else you would like to speak to us before we go?
Sure. Speaking of wisdom, a gift that my ancestors have given to me is along the lines of many indigenous peoples' core values and beliefs across the world. And it is a stark and striking difference than the morals and values of the colonizer that we experience here today. And this can be seen as a wrong interpretation of the truth, But for me, what is most true is a phrase that I'll share with you that I repeat to myself almost every single day. And what I tell myself is strong mind, wise body, and intelligent heart.
Mm.
And I tell myself, I have a strong mind, I have a wise body, and I have an intelligent heart. And for me, that is the foundation of my truth. My mind is not filled with intellect. My mind is not filled with knowledge. My mind is filled with strength. My body is not filled with strength. My body is not filled with endurance. My body is filled with wisdom. And my heart is not filled with wisdom or knowledge or care even. My heart is filled with intelligence. And so I would love for other people to have that knowledge as well, that they can create their own truth for what is the definition of their brain, what is the definition of their heart, what is the definition of their body, and feel free to define absolutely everything authentically 100% of the way until death.
Yeah. I loved all that. I'm really curious about the intelligent heart. Could you speak more about what the intelligence is, I guess?
Yes. Again, indigenous people world over for thousands of years have regarded the heart as the center of knowledge. And the driving difference and separation between indigenous people and the colonizer that they experienced was that a person with an intelligent heart cannot assume that there is another individual on earth that does not think with their heart. And so encountering the colonizer, someone who prides and honors the mind and intellect and progress and civility, for having such an intelligent mind, I think it's pretty safe to say that this person's heart is dead.
Yeah.
There's just no way to treat a human being with such violence if you're thinking with your heart. And so this is why I choose to think with my heart, why I choose to trust what my heart tells me, is because I just don't believe knowledge or exists in a brain. I don't believe that's what my brain is for. My brain is not for knowledge. My brain is not for intellect. That's for my heart. And choosing my actions, choosing my decisions with my heart aligns me with my ancestors who have done the same.
That's so powerful. Thank you so much. I love hearing it's just, thank you. How can folks connect with you?
You can connect with me on all the platforms: Instagram, Facebook, Twitter. You can also visit my website, which is www.mojosexual.com. You can contact me there. I would love to be contacted there. There's constantly new information coming up about what I'm working on my website. And I will slowly begin to crawl out of my own isolation and back into the world through my website. So that would be cool. But I'm on Instagram a lot, and will be on my website even more in the near future.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Thanks again so much for being here this evening. And folks that are listening on the podcast, you can find all the links in the description below. Just thank you so much. For my next episode is going to take place on Monday, again at 7 p.m. Pacific Standard Time, in which I'll be having a conversation about dragon spirituality with Honey Mahogany. I'm sure many folks know a lot about Honey, and I'm really excited to get a chance to speak with her. She's had a lot of really awesome just things happen even real recently. And so I'm really excited to get to talk with her more. The more I've researched, I was like, I didn't even know some of these things. So I'm really, really excited to get to know her a little bit more and to have her share herself with you all. And then on Wednesday, I'm doing a dragon spirituality multi-faith conversation with a drag king out of the UK, Louis Cypher, and a queen out of Canada, Mingo Lassie, and a Chicago queen, Coco Chanel. And we're all going to be talking all at once. I think it should be really cool. I'm really excited about it. So if folks want to check it out, and again, that's 7 p.m. No, actually, it's 5 p.m. Pacific Standard Time. That's 7 p.m. in Chicago, 8 p.m. in Toronto, Canada, and it's 1 a.m. in the UK. So,
wow.
Yes, so I'll stop with all that. But thanks everyone who joined us this evening. Take care and be well. Happy Pride or whatever else you're celebrating.
Happy Pride.